As the fighting goes on in Libya, Colonel Gaddafi's wife and 3 of his children have fled Libya, crossing into Algeria.
The group includes Gaddafi's daughter Aisha and sons Mohammed and Hannibal. The rebels say they'll seek the family's extradition.
There is more fierce fighting as Libya's rebels try again to reach Colonel Gaddafi's home city of Sirte.
The gates are beginning to open on the Gaddafi regime's extensive spying operation.
Battered by Irene, America's East Coast begins a major cleanup while Vermont deals with the worst flooding for a century. Very warm welcome to BBC World News. My name's Mike Embley.
And I'm Tanya Beckett. Also coming up in the programme, restoring Greece to economic health. 2 of the country's biggest banks agree to merge. And optimism about the economy returns. In New York, American stock markets rally. Hello, the whereabouts of Colonel Gaddafi remain unknown, but there is new information about some of his family. Algeria has confirmed that his wife and 3 of his children have fled there, drawing strong criticism from the Libyan rebel leadership. They plan to seek the family's extradition. It is also reported that Colonel Gaddafi's son, Hamis, a feared military commander, has been killed. And the rebels say they're closing in on the leader's last stronghold, his hometown of Sirte. With all the day's developments, here's the BBC's Middle East editor, Jeremy Bone from Tripoli. There, and we hope to be hearing from him just a little later. As Colonel Gaddafi lost control of Tripoli, 1 loyal supporter stayed behind. Abdel Basit Ali al-Magrahi, the only man convicted of the Lockerbie bombing, is living in a villa in the capital. He is suffering from terminal cancer. He's said to be close to death. He was released by the Scottish government 2 years ago on compassionate grounds. From Tripoli, Daniel Sanford has the story. Forces loyal to Colonel Gaddafi retreat from Tripoli. They're leaving behind evidence of how his regime operated. Inside Gaddafi's internal security headquarters, there are piles of photographs and documents bearing witness to a reign of terror. The BBC's Orla Guerin gained access to the building. Lauren's report just a little earlier. We can hear from him live now. He's in Tripoli. Jeremy, still horror stories emerging. It seems likely still many more to come.
Yes, you know, at the end of a regime like the one of Colonel Gaddafi's, which has used a lot of force against its own people, there will be that kind of information coming out. And I think that the whole process of getting that information out ought to be part of trying to build a new nation here.
Jeremy, just give us some context on this. It seems very likely one of the great Gaddafi hate figures, Hamis, may well be dead. Why are the rest of the family so important to the rebels?
Well, first of all, Hamis al-Gaddafi, his death has been reported before. It was reported during the NATO bombing, and I think a couple of times since then. He was he was the military son. He had a widely feared military unit. As for the rest of the family, well, 2 sons, his daughter Aisha, sons Hannibal and Mohammed, and his wife have shown up in Algeria. The Algerians have accepted them into the country. Now, in the last 6 months or so in Libya, all the Libyans I've spoken to, from opponents of the regime through to senior officials within it, through to Colonel Gaddafi himself, have all said that the colonel would rather die in Libya than go into exile. But it seems that certainly 4 members of his family do not feel the same way.
All right, Jeremy, for the moment, thank you very much. In Syria, activists say at least 6 people, including a child, have been killed as security forces crush protests against President Assad. They say heavy gunfire has been heard near the southern entrance of the town Rastan, forcing many residents to flee. Tanks and troops are also reported in towns near Damascus and Homs. The United Nations has warned of a possible resurgence of the bird flu virus H5N1. It says a new mutant strain is spreading in Asia. The UN's Food and Agriculture Organization blames migrating birds for bringing the virus to previously unaffected countries. It seems the mutant strain has the ability to evade existing vaccines. Japan's finance minister Yoshihiko Noda has been elected to lead the country's ruling DPJ party, making it all but certain he'll become Japan's next prime minister. He's been outspoken on tackling the country's budget deficit.
Now, she brought some of America's largest cities to a standstill, and today the cleanup from Hurricane Irene is well underway. Between North Carolina and New England, at least 30 people were killed, millions were left without power, and the economic damage is still being calculated. From New York, Laura Trevelyan reports on the widespread damage.
And some much-needed encouraging news for Greece. Two of the country's biggest banks have agreed to merge, sending their shares soaring 30%, while the broader Greek market index let 21%, the biggest rise in more than 20 years. Eurobank and Alpha Bank say the deal will play a vital role in the Greek economic recovery. The combination will strengthen the two companies' capital. The Qatar Investment Authority, which is already an Alpha shareholder, will also take a bigger stake in the new bank. Let's take a look at how the markets reacted to all of this. Well, of course, there were enormous concerns about the damage that Hurricane Irene would wreak. In the event, it was much less than some had been expecting. The markets are quite positive about that, in addition to which some fairly strong consumer spending figures emerging from the United States, the strongest actually for some time. And also this optimism about the Greek banks, that Greece is taking such bold moves in order to get the economy in order. All good, Mike.
And much more to come a little later.
Much more to come on World Business Report, and that is in 15 minutes' time.
Stick around. You're watching BBC World News. Apart from that, the latest international sport and fire, smoke and lava as Sicily's Mount Etna erupts again.
And 10 years after the attacks of 9/11, artists in Edinburgh use a sensitive subject to inspire their performances.
Latest headlines for you this hour on BBC World News. The government of Algeria has confirmed that Colonel Gaddafi's wife and 3 of his children have fled across the border and entered Algeria.
Fierce fighting continues on the road to Sirte as Libya's rebels try again to reach Colonel Gaddafi's hometown. Staying with our top story, Libya. A leaked document from the United Nations appears to show plans for the reconstruction of Libya, where they could deploy 200 unarmed military observers. Let's now cross now to our correspondent Barbara Plett in New York for more. So it seems, Barbara,
in Sri Lanka, a spate of mysterious violent attacks by so-called grease devils is causing panic in many parts of the country. No one's been arrested or claimed responsibility, but now a brutal vigilante response is emerging. This report from the BBC's Charles Howard.
Eruption on Sicily's Mount Etna 8 days after the latest began. The airport, Catania, the city near the volcano, is not affected so far. Anna Holligan now reports.
Anna Holligan, BBC News.
Now to the Edinburgh Festival. After weeks of performances, it is now drawing to a close.
True to form, tens of thousands have flocked to the Scottish capital to see more than 2,000 different shows.
One of the most sensitive subjects addressed was the upcoming anniversary of the 9/11 attacks.
10 years after events which changed the United States forever, Danny Robbins reports on how artists at Edinburgh dealt with. Danny Robbins reporting there. Now, a reminder of the main international news. The Algerian government has confirmed that the wife of Colonel Gaddafi, Safia, and 3 of his children have fled to Algeria from Libya. It's also reported that Colonel Gaddafi's son, Khamis, a feared military commander, has been killed, and the rebels say they're closing in on the leader's last stronghold, his home city of Sirte.
Do stay with us. Sport Today coming up, and World Business Report with herself.